If you ask me where I want to be, most of the time the answer is right here on my small holding in my garden. But sometimes life just doesn't let you do what you want all the time. And sometimes we can't be in our gardens as much as we want to be. And that just happens to be where I'm at the moment. You know, it's just life doing its thing, nothing crazy. But while I'm not quite getting the time that I would like to spend in the garden, just for the time being, I thought I would jump on and just kind of chat about how I'm trying to keep on top of things, even though I'm, you know, have got a lot going on just outside of small holding life. Nothing drastic, just happens to be a busy time for the next few weeks. So I'm just basically trying to keep everything ticking over here, and prioritizing the things that I need to do, so that even though I'm having a few weeks where I'm not giving it much attention, I'm not sacrificing what I want out of this garden, which at the end of the day is food. It is a bit stressful to be pulled away from the garden, like especially at this time of year, just when, you know, the days are nice and long, the weather's getting that bit warmer and everything is suddenly bursting into life. It's not ideal timing, but with a bit of preparation and trying to stay organised, you know, this can just be a little blip, and then once I've got the time back again, I'll be able to pick it back up. So I thought I would chat through with you what I'm doing, how I'm prioritising, and how I'm making those choices on what to do before I'm off again and I'll be leaving my garden for another few days without any attention. So I thought I'd just show you what I'm up to, how I'm managing it, and what my mindset is on being busy but keeping the garden going. So before I show you what I'm doing sort of in the small pockets of time that I do have out here, I want to say that first things first, what I've done before this busy period was put the irrigation in this polytunnel, which has made the world of difference because I don't have to be here for this to get watered. I also don't have to spend time when I've only got 20 minutes here and there. I don't have to spend it watering. I can just flip the tap on and go do something else and flip the tap off, and then at least I know that that's been done. So automating, or you know, using tools that can make your life easier is a great idea if you can get it done before your busy bit kicks in. So other than in the polytunnel, I mean, I live in North Wales, so it rains a lot. I don't water the rest of the garden. So generally speaking, for me, once it's outside, I don't have to worry about it with regards to water. But that brings me on to my next point, and that is weeding. Now, while I'm trying to prioritise my time in the garden, and one of the jobs I want to do the least is weeding, but I think it's the job that is the most detrimental to leave undone for an extra week or two. So when I come in this tunnel at the moment, thinking that I don't have time to do all the jobs that need doing, the job I want to do when I'm looking at this tomato is to prune. You know, these suckers are coming on and I want to be spending my time doing that. But if I look down here under this plant, I can see a load of grass and buttercups creeping in here, and I think realistically, if I don't get out here for another few days, these suckers on this tomato plant will be a bit bigger, but it won't really affect my harvest significantly if they have an extra few days of growth. Whereas if I let the weeds grow on for an extra few days, you know, I can foresee that that's going to become a job that's going to become a real pain in my ass, you know? Whereas the pruning is going to take the same amount of time whether I do it now or if I do it when they're a bit bigger. Whereas a couple of little freshly sprouted weeds I can just pull now and it's no trouble whatsoever. Once these start to establish, this starts to become a real problem for me. So knowing that I can't get all the jobs done in this polytunnel before I go, I'm going to leave the tomatoes. I'm going to not worry too much about staking them perfectly, because again, in an extra few days I might get a slightly wonky tomato. There's no fruit on them yet, they're not going to snap or anything under the weight. So actually my priority in this tunnel, before I leave it for a few days, is to make sure that the weeds are completely under control. So if I'm not here, usually someone is, because we've got animals. So, you know, the land is never left alone. I can ask someone to flick some water on or to do a bit of harvesting maybe, but I can't ask people to do my weeding for me. So that is one of those things that if it needs to be done, I really have to do it before I leave. Oh, I reckon I'm gonna have cucumbers when I get back. So in an ideal world, everything would be thoroughly weeded before I left the land for a few days. You know, there would be no weeds in sight and the grass would be perfectly mown, but you know, I live in the real world and that's not going to happen. So I have to prioritize. And for me, I'm prioritizing this tunnel purely because this is where the most dense food production is. I don't want to waste any of it. Also, this is new this year, so it's kind of my project and what I'm babying the hell out of. Otherwise, in terms of what I am going to prioritize, is anything that is young or freshly planted into a bed. A well-established plant, it's not the end of the world if a bit of weeds grow up around it. You can still just pull a weed even if it's been left a few days. What I've done today is plant out some baby corn, sweet corns. So I've made sure that they are completely weed free. They are like 3 or 4 inches tall. They can't withstand too much weed pressure at this stage. And when they're so young and their roots aren't established yet, I don't want to have to be coming and pulling lots of things up around them. So I'm prioritizing those young things that will potentially be damaged. The harvest will be damaged by a bit of weed pressure. Obviously, weeds around an established plant is still not great. It's still going to limit things, but being a bit weedy for an extra few days isn't going to make too much difference at the end of the day. They're not going to lose the battle. It might just knock them back by a day or two on your harvest, but that's less of a big deal to me than a new bed of planted out sweet corn being taken over by grass in a few days and when I'm not around to see it. I also need to make sure that I get a nice layer of mulch on everything as I weed it, because again, that's just going to buy me that little bit extra time and protect the soil a little bit from both drying out in case we have nice weather when I'm not here to water, or the weeds coming back in. So weeding and mulching are how I spend most of my day the day before I'm about to leave, knowing that I won't be in the garden for a little bit. It's not glamorous, but it's just what needs to be done. So once I've got my weeds down to an acceptable level and everything is mulched, if I've still got time, the next thing I will turn my attention to is actually harvesting, which is a much more jazzy job. And in particular, I'm talking the things that you don't want to leave to go over. Some things, if they go slightly over, it's not the end of the world. If you miss tomatoes, they'll drop. It's not ideal, but a couple of tomatoes lost is not the end of the world. So I'm thinking more of the things where if you don't pick them, if you don't harvest, they stop producing. So like your beans and your peas. So I want to make sure on my peas, I don't have ripe beans right now yet, but I've got peas on the go. So I've made sure today that I've pulled every single pea pod off of that plant. So I'm sending the signal that keep producing me peas, and in a few days by the time I get back, I'm sure there'll be more to pick, but I don't want to leave any to go over because I don't want that plant to stop producing for me. And then of course, anything else that's ready that's going to go to waste if I don't pick it, then I may as well, assuming that I have something to do with it or I have the capacity to preserve whatever that thing is. While there are some messy bits and bobs going on, like stuff's gone to seed, this is the kind of thing that I'm absolutely going to ignore for now. This is obviously a job that needs to be done. Take out the things that have gone over. Leaving this for an extra few days or an extra week isn't stopping me from doing anything else or getting any other harvests from this garden at the moment. It's not worth me spending the time on stuff like this at the moment. What I'll also prioritise doing, if I know I'm not going to have my attention on the garden for a little while, is to plant anything out that is in a seed tray or pot it up into a bigger pot. The margin of error for something planted in the ground or in a bed is so much greater than if they're in a small module tray. The temperature is so much more stable, they're so much less likely to dry out than they are in a tray. So I try to make sure that anything that can be planted out is planted out, especially if I'm leaving someone to do watering or things for me. The fewer specific things they have to find to water to keep alive, the better. You're just reducing the risk that something is gonna die in its pot before it gets the chance to go out, which is why I've put those corns out today, because I want to make sure they don't get root bound in that tray, and that they don't dry out, and that they don't cook in this tunnel if the doors don't get opened if the sun's out. So I think the risk for them is much lower out in the bed, especially in a place that is due a fair amount of rain in the next week or so. I am basically looking to leave it as easy to manage as is humanly possible. Maybe you're in the position where you are at home, but you're just going to be really busy, so you've only got 10 minutes a day to tend to your garden. Make it as easy on yourself as possible and decide ahead of time which things you're going to let go, and knowing that you'll have that job to do at the end, but that's okay if that's part of your plan. And likewise, if someone else is looking after space for you if you're going away, especially when people aren't gardeners. And even if they are, you'll do things differently. Leaving it as simple the jobs as simple to understand as possible is always going to be better. Don't leave it up to judgment calls. If you can write it on a piece of paper what you'd want someone to do step by step, then it's probably okay. As soon as it starts being like, oh, see what it's like, keep an eye on this, you're just asking for trouble. I think it is just important at the end of the day to remember that life does happen. We can't be glued to our gardens all the time, even if we want to be. And this is just a short period of time for me, so I'll be back to it, and I'll show you when I'm back around. Expect things to be not quite as tidy and not quite as well managed as they could otherwise be, but that's life, and I'll pick it up then, and I'll fix the problems that have happened. That hopefully, having put these things into action, the state of things is going to be predictable for me. I know what I've not done, I know what I have done, so I know where my focus needs to be when I've got the time again. So I think it's just important to try not to stress out about it. Life does happen, so knowing that I'll be back in my garden mostly full time very soon. So this is just to getting through this phase, and I'll show you the state of it when I'm back. But hopefully things won't be too bad and we'll be able to jump straight back in. And if you're sat there thinking, well, I don't go anywhere and I do all my gardening all the time and I never leave it, well, you don't need to brag, okay? I get it. I'll catch up with you guys soon. Thank you.